Even though perplexed and in absolute shock, Ascended General Obliver reacted in an instant as his daggers were raised upwards, his hand gripping slightly the hilt, and then, space was slashed into pieces as his two daggers cleaved downward with power towards the approaching glitching energy pillar. Techno Obliver Art. Danger Sync. Kaboom! A powerful shockwave rippled from the blast as Ascended General Obliver's dagger cut through the attack, a mushroom of space and glitching energy distorting the view. Yet, its senses tingled as he suddenly felt a hand tear through the collapsed space, grabbing both of his wrists. Ryuk burst out from the destructive space, his clothes burned off fully from the devastation, but he idly wore a smirk. His grip tightened on the wrist of the Ascended General, whose reaction didn't slow down a single bit. His head instantly descended toward Ryuk. Bang! 5 headbutts as fast as lightning. Blood spurted out from Ryuk's nose and lips as his eyes almost rolled to the back from the devastating hits. Yet he smiled through the pain, his grin widening as his head jerked to back up. His legs instantly coiled around Ascended General Obliver's waist, and then, Ryuk's rotating vortex eyes stared at his wrist, altering one of the bonds in them as the wrist of General Ascended Obliver snapped at an unnatural angle, resulting in him quickly letting go of the daggers. And before they could move far, they landed into Ryuk's grasp as he exerted strength on Ascended General Obliver's waist, and forcefully turned. Ryuk now sat straight, Ascended General Obliver's body beneath him in midspace, with both his daggers resting in Ryuk's grasp. Ryuk grinned evilly as Ascended General Obliver's fists punch with power towards Ryuk's Afyet before it could cover half the distance. Ryuk thrust downward towards his masked face with both daggers. It was unending pierce after pierce. Ryuk kept stabbing down with both dagger with a speed so fast his hand became a blur as the daggers came in through Ascended General Obliver's head, ripping apart chunks of mentals. And he continued, his blue eyes spinning powerfully the more he stabbed until they started to reveal a hollow crimson light, and only after he heard the loud words did his speed finally slow down. The daggers in his hand had already shattered into pieces, leaving him with just the hilts. Below him was the fragile body of Ascended General Obliver, whose entire head had been skewed into nothing. His entire upper body left with nothing but entangled scraps. And silently, Ryuk let go of the blade as he released his hold on the general's waist and floated upwards, watching as Ascended General Obliver's corpse glitched convulsively as it descended downward. You have completed the rule of defeating Ascended General Obliver. You will now begin scanning to be eligible for the aforementioned rewards. The eerie voice rang through the realm as Ryuk's eyebrows creased softly. Eligible? Wasn't the rule pretty clear? He muttered under breath. But the next words confused him even more. Unfortunately, you have been disqualified to be unworthy of the primordial rewards. Your strength is beyond what was supposed to challenge the trial, meaning you have cheated. You will now be sent away. The words rang out as Ryuk clicked his tongue. Sounds like I got ripped off, he thought, but shrugging it off. He never came here expecting a reward. He just wanted a decent fight, so if they wanted to take it away the rewards from him, he never really cared for it in the first place. But suddenly, interaction. System has been aware of host being deprived of his reward, as promised by the ruling of a fractionate primordial realm. System will now begin forceful injection of reward. Host may experience a minute of slumber, the system announced, and before Ryuk could say more, his body suddenly went limp as his eyes slowly shut close. The second he went unconscious, the space stirred around Ryuk, silently trying to send him away from the realm. Yet something horrific burst out of Ryuk's body. An awakened power, a wave of divine energy that erupted into the entire realm, spreading with incredible speed toward every single corner of the Technoforge. And in the next instant, the angered words rang out. You're overriding my primordial rules. You do not dare. The voice, which was clearly from an ancient entity, boomed out loudly in anger, yet all was met with silence as the system's divine energy continued forward, covering the entire depth of the realm, and then, vroom, a shocking absorption force descended upon the entire realm, congregating above Ryuk's unconscious body. The various floating anomaly buildings were pulled forward with power. The glitching holographs of the armory sentients were also pulled in along with the rest of the space, including even the half-anchored corpse of Ascended General Obliver, all sucked into a small ball on Ryuk's chest. You hold an essence of the primordial justice force. How? What are you? The words voiced out beyond shock out shrilly, yet the system notification flashed. Repercuration rule has been activated. Absolute erasure of evil entity will now begin. Wait. No. A powerful, heavy shrieking reverberated around as the divine energy around Ryuk suddenly began converging. And soon they formed something unbelievable, a weapon that reached far into the depth of space. Standing at about 10,000 meters in pure energy, forming a blazing golden scythe that stood above everything, it instantly cleaved downwards toward the entire realm, slashing it into 2 straight pieces. The shrill scream was instantly cut off. The entire realm was divided into 2 before the golden energy returned back into Ryuk's body. All that remained in front of Ryuk was a singular ball, the congregation of the realm, and swiftly it suddenly bore a hole straight into Ryuk's chest before disappearing within. Denied rewards have been safely obtained. Automatic movement protocol of host will now begin. The system notification flashed before Ryuk's body suddenly began floating into the depths of space. It soon arrived before a vortex standing before a large dark gate. At the top of the vortex was a number 3 that was glistening in gold, and quickly Ryuk's body soared into it as he disappeared through the vortex, leaving behind him an empty void. The floating debris and the glitching entities had been devoured by the system and officially assimilated into the slumbering Ryuk. And that way, the second floor of the Gate of Soulless Ruin was completed. The sound of bubbling filled the air, and immediately burst. The surface of the liquid rippled as a head burst out from within the waters, the sound of a deep gasp echoing through the area. The figure was none other than Ryuk himself, now floating, coming to flow to the rhythm of the sea as he took repeated deep breaths before his heart finally settled. Looking around him, his eyes flashed when he saw he was currently floating in a blue sea that seemingly had no end, and there was nothing more except for the cloudless blue sky above him. Where am I? He mused to himself as he scanned the entire area before him and sensed no alarming ripples, showing he was probably alone in this. And immediately, Ryuk lifted himself up from the sea, coming to hover on top of it. Now he felt more secure, and that was when he noticed something abnormal about the sea's surface. But then, the system notification flashed, diverting his attention. Host has awakened. Congratulations on completing the second floor of the Gate of Soulless Ruin. Host has acquired the rewards. Possession of the Techno Forge Ruin. A new techno ability. The system flashed as Ryuk's eyes furrowed confusedly. I got the reward? But if I heard correctly the last time, it was said that I didn't qualify for it. Didn't it? Ryuk voiced out his suspicion, but after not being able to think of anything else and the system keeping quiet, he could only shrug it off. Seems like the realm changed its mind. What's the skill, though? He couldn't help but ask, and immediately, the notification flashed before his gaze. Skills and abilities. Subgroup, Techno Forge Authority. Subgroup, Techno Sovereignty. Skill, Sovereign of the Techno Forge LV. 1. Type, Active/Passive. Description. A unique skill bestowed upon the accomplished trial taker of one of the pieces of the ancient Techno Forge Ruin. Grants control over forge-based creations, blueprint manipulation, and legacy artifact reconstruction. Effect. Allows user access into the Techno Forge Ruin. Summon mobile Techno Forge warriors that follow every command. Additional skill. Techno Forge Ruin Panel Overlook. Grants ability to regulate the Techno Forge realm, including but not limited to material synthesis, blueprint memory bank access, and artifact evolution engine. The system notification blinked in and out as Ryuk calmly read through, comprehending each piece, but not completely. So in the end, he decided to make things simpler, experience things firsthand. Activate Sovereign of Techno Forge, he uttered. In the next instant, something opened right above Ryuk's head. As he turned his head up toward it, he saw the sight of a gigantic vortex spiraling from the point above him, quickly expanding until it reached about 5 meters in diameter. Ryuk floated upward, disappearing into the vortex, which closed back. When he opened his eyes, he opened them to the sight of a familiar place. The same broken realm with debris of floating buildings and destabilized gravity. But what was clear to Ryuk now were the Techno-Forge warriors that were glitching in and out of existence. He was more than surprised when he found one standing before the rest. It was none other than Ascendant General Obliver, whom he had defeated and almost destroyed, now standing before him, although his form was more glitched out than the rest. Techno Ruin Panel Overlook System has been activated. Ruin Panel, Techno Forge System Overview. Ruin Classification. Sovereign Class Construct Bastion. Status: partially reactivated. Energy Core Integrity: 25%. Access granted to Ryuk I status: Bound Sovereign. So, I truly have obtained the ability to be in charge of the Techno-Forge realm, huh? Nice, but it seems the energy core of it is very low right now. Just 25%. Perhaps that is why all of these techno-warriors are glitching and unstable? The realm's energy is too low to sustain their forms, Ryuk muttered, looking at various techno-forge warriors who were unresponsive. Perhaps I just need to find a way to increase the energy level, he uttered before focusing his attention back to the panel. Core functions available at current level. 1. Access to Ruin Interior. Awakened Soldier Command. Basic Blueprint Archives. Locked. New Construct Designs. Locked. AI Link. Dormant. Right now, the Techno-Forge realm is at level 1. Makes sense for its low energy core then. But it seems the majority of its effects are locked up. The only thing I'm capable of right now is the ability to enter the Techno-Forge ruin itself, and the Awakened Soldier Command, which means all the current glitching Nano-Force soldiers should be able to be controlled by me. Ryuk muttered, and he blinked right then and there, appearing before a random Techno-Forge warrior. One that seemed like a huge tiger, and Ryuk's hand stretched downward as it landed on its head. Immediately, the word entered his lips as he unconsciously muttered, "Awaken." Immediately, a ripple spread out from Ryuk's hands toward the glitching techno-constructs, and the watched as the glitching energy quickly coiled tighter before the tiger beast construct's 2 eyes flashed a bright blue, settling on Ryuk himself before. Roar! It raised up its head and loudly roared into the sky, as if declaring its awakening before coming to stand directly behind Ryuk. So I can awaken them, most likely all of them, and they follow my basic command. That makes sense. The basic blueprint archives are locked. I don't know what that means, but then the construct creation system is also closed. Could that mean I could create more of these guys? He muttered, looking at glitching techno-warriors. Also, new construct designs are also locked. That means there must be new designs to be used in the created constructs. Right now, there are beasts, humanoid warriors, and even man-beasts. Perhaps there are even more, and once I level up this Techno-Forge realm higher, I should be able to get them all, Ryuk muttered to himself before he continued reading the panel. The next few words were the ones that really shook his heart as he felt it loudly thumping in his chest. Current awakened Techno-Forge soldiers, 200. Potential capability. Construct classification. Tactical core divisions. Warforgers. Blades of the Sovereign. Primary combatants and frontliners. Basic command. Engage, destroy, and occupy. Order command inclusion. Go. TCHNOGUARDS. Shields of the Realm. Defensive Titans and Guardian Protocols. Basic command. Fortify and defend. Order command inclusion. Hold. Neuroshades. Eyes of the Sovereign. Espionage specialists and infiltration units. Basic command. Scout and report. Order command inclusion. Drift. So there are a total of about 200 of these constructs available for me right now, and they're all designed into 3 groups. It's like a tactical military formation: the warriors, the defenders, and the spies. These constructs are divided as such. Ryuk summarized, comprehending before moving on. Total techno-constructs, 200, awakened. Warforgers, 80. Technoguards, 60. Neuroshades, 60. Warforgers, 80 units. 1x Ascendant General, Obliver, Eternity class. 2x High Exarchs, Cataclysm class. 7x Iron Strategians, Dominion class. 20x Shockblades, Ascension class. 50x Pulse Raiders, Origin class. TECHNOGUARDS, 60 units. 3x Bastion Lords, Cataclysm class. 10x Technoguards, Dominion class. 17x Barrier-Born Vanguards, Ascension class. 30x Wall March Enforcers, Origin class. Neuroshades, 60 units. 1x Phantom Warden, Cataclysm class. 4x Mind Pierces, Dominion class. 15x Ghost Links, Ascension class. 40x Net Veils, Origin class. This is an army. A battle army? All under my command. Ryuk muttered disbelievingly under his breath. Correct, host. The Technoforge Ruin is a war artifact used to conquer worlds by the ancient techno races. There are more fragments like this existing out there in the universe, and Host has been lucky enough to possess this one. All the constructs are under Host's command, and their primary use is battle. Host has just gained an army of his own. The system notification flashed as Ryuk's eyes flashed. An Eternity Stage expert, about a total of 6 Cataclysm experts, a total of 21 Dominion experts, 52 Ascension class, and 120 Origin class experts. This will be enough to bring ruin upon an entire Indearth grade. Ryuk muttered to himself as his hand clenched in his seat. As unbelievable as it sounded, he now had something to fight his war for him, apart from his pets. But that wasn't all the panel had revealed. System Protocol, Mass Ascension Drive, MAD Protocol. Description: a dormant, high-level system within the Technoforge Ruin, locked until specific criteria are met. Once activated, it pushes all awakened constructs to their next evolutionary tier simultaneously while unlocking other slumbering constructs. Requirements for activation: Nanocore Reactor, a legendary energy source the Sovereign must find or forge, capable of outputting enough quantum pulse to rewire all constructs at once. Quantum Synchronization Beacon, crafted within the Reforge, requires 2 materials that will be revealed once a nanocore reactor is possessed. Synchronizes all constructs to the Forge's AI, allowing simultaneous evolution. Consequences and rewards: 1. Massive energy drain. Technoforge enters a temporary lockdown during upgrade, 24-hour time freeze. 2. All 200 units will ascend 1 class tier upward. 3. A total of 10 new Eternity-level experts, 30 Cataclysm experts, and 70 Dominion experts will be awakened from slumber. Seems like I can also upgrade all of the individual constructs' strength and even unlock more constructs. I just need 2 things: a nanocore reactor and a quantum synchronization beacon. Huh? Ryuk muttered to himself. Both of the words weren't striking any chord in his head, and he couldn't help but turn to the system. Hey system, any idea what these 2 are? Can I buy them from the shop? Ryuk asked. System has not much information about both objects, and they are not techno-related artifacts available for purchase in the shop. The system answered as Ryuk's eyes furrowed before he hung his head. I guess I'll have to find out what those mean by myself. The only person I can think of that might be of help is High Scholar Amiris. But asking him such questions will just make him suspect. But wait. If I've taken the Technoforge Ruin, which was what the 2nd floor of the Gate of Solace Ruin is, then now, could it mean that there no longer exists a 2nd floor? If there's no longer a 2nd floor, then what happens to the rest of the students? And if High Scholar Amiris is in charge of the entire realm, wouldn't he already be aware of its absence? Ryuk couldn't help but utter as he gave one last look at the glitching constructs, deactivating the one he had activated before he instantly removed his consciousness. deactivating the skill, and in the next moment the world around him dropped as he came to arrive before the surface of the blue sea. Ryuk exhaled loudly when he arrived back in the real world, as a light flashed in his closed eyes. I'll find a way through this. For now, I'll focus on what's right before me, he said, opening his eyes to the sight of the large sea below him. And only now could he truly see the sea, and what it was made of. His eyes flashed in shock. This, Ryuk said, choking back on his words as the artificial panel flashed. Yes, host. This is Etheric energy, concentrated so much that it formed a sea. Right below host is a sea of Etheric energy, and not just any Etheric energy, the purest concentration of Etheric energy, 3 times the quality of Etheric cultivation in the Silvernick royal home. So, this is the mentioned reward. The soulful ruin of Niagara. Ryuk voiced out before instantly, he soared down into the sea below. Immediately, he could feel a cooling energy that instantly snaked through his body, surging into his mental realm even though he hadn't yet used activated technique. This is a massive opportunity. Hey system, if I absorb every single drop of the energy present in the sea, what do you think my cultivation level will be at the end? Ryuk asked, and the system panel appeared. If host absorbs every single drop of Etheric in this sea, host's cultivation will break through the astral crowned realm, the equivalent of the eternity stage. Really? Ryuk asked in shock, eyes lighting with disbelief. Yes, but unfortunately, host will never be able to absorb every single drop, as there are already Silverunics in this sea who are quietly absorbing, diminishing what host can gain. Also, it will take about 6 months of focused absorption to fully consume all of this. I doubt High Scholar Emery's is dumb enough to allow you all stay in here too long. You know what? You're right, Ryuk said out loud before he instantly dove deep into the sea, swimming downwards. He soon arrived at the floor bed, which was about 1,000 meters depth from the surface, and then he remained upright before bringing together both hands. High Scholar Amiris wouldn't really leave the realm open forever unless he's an idiot, which from what I've heard, isn't. But if one thing is sure, he would leave this rift open enough for the youngling Silverunics to undergo significant changes. And the time that would take an ordinary Silverunic to undergo significant change is what will make me undergo extraordinary growth. I'll be going all out with absorption. You will hurt your veins if you don't stop cultivating every 8 hours and rest 4 hours. The drain will be too much for your veins to handle. It'll be worth it, Ryuk replied back as his hand instantly began moving incredibly fast and forming various sigils, and soon enough, shockingly huge vortexes began spiraling around Ryuk, as a gigantic whirlpool soon opened up above the Etheric sea surface, all gushing into Ryuk, the end point. The energy amount would be unbelievable to the most talented Etheric cultivator, and one could already see slight strain on Ryuk's face even though a minute had not yet passed. He was currently operating the Titan Mindflow Sutra at the best of his power right now, without a care in the world. Why? The system notification flashed even through Ryuk's knitted eyebrows, and his expression flickered with a bit of emotion through the strain before he thought back. A feeling that things will go real south once I get out of this place. And the me right now is not ready for it yet. In a grand hall the size of an entire End-Earth home, the color of gold surrounded every single particle that exists in this place. The walls were in golden color, covered in runic lines and drawings. The ground was golden, with the same runic lines, and at the center of this hall was a wide table. A gigantic golden table, with nothing but a simple planetary ball on it. It was the same as those ones that were usually in the geology lab, showing the spherical Earth rotating on an iron stand, except this one was much larger, and on it were countless golden dots packed here and there. Behind the counter was a masculine entity, an entity draped in the same golden color as the hall, wearing a golden shirt along with a golden jacket on top and golden trousers to boot. His face was dark in complexion. His ears pointed like those of an elf, but most captivating were his eyes. They burned with a golden ferociousness that wouldn't pale to that of the sun. The deep hum reverberated through the entire hall as the figure's right hand rested on the large table, while his left held his chin, eyes narrowed at one of the golden lights on the planetary object. Step. The sound of footsteps echoed along the tables as the gigantic gate opened up, and the figure stepped in, walking across the hall's entire length in calm steps before eventually arriving before the masculine entity. It's not all the time one gets to see that serious expression of yours, Asgard. The voice was feminine, melodious, and clear, as Asgard slowly raised his head to the figure. She was a lady, oval-shaped face with long golden hair splashed, donning a long robe of equal gold. Her aura screamed of regality, and her beauty, even in this boundless world, was close to unmatched. "Hi, Lady Moriano," Asgard voiced out, as he rose upright from the table, hands by his side. The lady gave a nod before her hand stretched forward towards the golden ball, and she turned Asgard's side to hers, her eyes faintly knitting together on the countless golden lights she was seeing. These golden lights before her, they held vast meaning, though they looked so tiny shining from such a tiny ball. What's troublesome, only a select few can read it, and she was unfortunately not amongst them. "What's wrong, Asgard?" the lady asked, turning to Asgard, who shook his head softly. "It's nothing for you to worry about, High Lady Moriano," he cajoled respectfully, but she shook her head. "I'm not worried. I just want to know what makes your eyes pinpoint in seriousness. It's been centuries since I've last seen one," she replied as the golden light in Asgard's eyes flashed a bit before he replied by pointing to a golden light on the ball. "We have kept tag on this anomaly for more than centuries now. His name is Emerys von Loren," he explained, as High Lady Moriano nodded her head. "Von Loren. His world grade is 2nd level. An anomaly from such a grade must have quite the fate aura, no?" she asked, and Asgard nodded his head. "Your words are true, High Lady Moriano. His fate power truly is monumental. But we left it because it wasn't causing much danger to the other worlds. He's one of the much calmer anomalies. He safeguards his world and all he does. For that reason, we have let him alone, and as he ages, his fate power began reducing and reducing. In a couple years it would most likely be snuffed out and be no longer of threat," he explained as High Lady Moriano nodded in understanding. "But just a couple hours ago, another anomaly light was sensed very close to him, and then his dying fate power suddenly began shooting up. That's not rare. 2 anomalies together bolster each other's fate power, either from joint work or potential for disorder," she explained, resulting in a nod from him. "Your words are true, High Lady Moriano. But the 2nd anomaly close to him?" he said, and she nodded. "And what about him?" "His fate power. It has jumped 3 times since he's become close to Emerys von Loren, and it's jumping 2 times more with every passing second," Asgard said, as High Lady Moriano's eyes glinted with gold. "A predatory fate sharing?" she asked, and Asgard nodded. "You are most likely right, Lady Moriano, but that isn't the problem. Oh, within this new anomaly, I sensed not 1, but 2 other anomalies seemingly residing in him, one of whose fate power is growing at a quarter of his own growth, and another of which has a fate power that is being failed to be read by the planetary fate ball. It's changing, quite monumentally." The thought echoed within an area of the dark void, where a singular entity took up the entire view. The phantom of a blue-scaled, 4-winged dragon floated in the void, head raised high, with a blue object brewing on top of its wide-open maw. This was, of course, none other than Ryuk's mental realm. And as he oversaw the entire realm like one standing above, he couldn't help but notice some vast changes that had occurred. For one, the mental veins that had conjoined to form the skeletal bones of the dragon had now been significantly altered. There was once a phantom of energy that previously covered the dragon's skeletal features, though not solidly, but now it had thickened so much it looked like blue skin. So thick, one could no longer see his mental veins, but the living flesh of a dragon, undulating with motes of blue energy. Not only that, but blue draconic scales had grown over the dragon's entire body, fortifying its realness even more, and the claws and fangs had solidified with the same blue light. The same could be said for the large 4 wings, But what was especially attention-grabbing was the huge ball of energy being conjured in the dragon's raised head. But that, too, had undergone a change, from a crackling, huge ball that was widening endlessly and growing bigger, into a smaller, rock-hard circular gem. A draconic gem? The thought unconsciously echoed in his mind, his eyes narrowing from the sudden clarity of what had bugged him through the notification. It was once said that the lucid spark realm is where the Aetheris veins will be formed, and the Thoughtweaver stage is where the core would form. The Cymancer stage is the stage of evolution. Perhaps it is like unfurling the core, just like how the ape core will be unfurled to form a domain hidden within. But Ryuk had noticed something. His Aetheris cultivation had gone completely off track from all these known pathways. For one, his mental veins had not only been formed, they had dismantled themselves once they had been unlocked by him, fusing together to create the skeletal feature of a mighty draconic creature. That was never part of the explanations at all, and such gigantic Aetheris veins were beyond anything recorded. Not only that, the Thoughtweaver stage was where the ether core ought to form, and Ryuk thought that was what was brewing in the dragon's maw. But not only that, his mental veins had undergone a vast change. From simple tunnels to bones, to becoming covered in phantasm of Aetheris energy, and then they had become covered in scales. True draconic scales made of dust of Aetheris light. And the ether core was no longer just a ball of energy. It was now a gem of hard essence, one whose surface, just from Ryuk's stare, could be 5 times as hard as diamond. These various changes weren't the explanations he was given about how ether works, and not even how Ryuk knew it should work. He had cultivated apex energy once and knew ether shouldn't be too different. But what was before him was almost something else entirely. It was almost like a true dragon is being birthed, like a draconic soul. He silently thought, but then, his eyes looked at the gleaming gem core one last time before he slowly withdrew his consciousness. Perhaps the blue-scaled Ryuk would have answers to this. He's the representation of my draconic bloodline, after all, and the one who showed me Aetheris in the first place. Ryuk muttered before his senses fully left the mental realm. When he opened his eyes, he found them flashing to the notification. Congratulations on host reaching the Cymancer stage. New skills have been awakened on breakthrough. The system notification flashed as Ryuk began looking at his surroundings. He was still submerged in the Aetheris Sea, though the previous 1,000 meters of depth had gone down to 700. It was a considerable change, but far from being fully absorbed. And calmly, he called off his Titan Mindflow Sutra as he slowly raised both hands up, bringing them close together before mimicking them in a parting motion. And the instant it was done, the entire sea of Aetheris above and around Ryuk was imparted open like a closed flower to the sun's ray. The ground beneath him was instantly ridden of Aetheris, and fresh air flooded beneath the sea as Ryuk turned to look at the sky. Turning one of his hands to face the ground, a triangular cut appeared beneath Ryuk's feet and then, grum! Stone and dust fell as the rectangular ground beneath Ryuk parted into a gigantic block, and in the next instant, it began flowing, bringing Ryuk up until he arrived above the sea, which merged back upon itself. Ryuk turned to look at his hands, clenching and unclenching them even though they seemed no different. My control of Aetheris has improved considerably. It's like the entire world seems to stem from me, and therefore my will holds on every part of it. He mused to himself before he noticed a brilliant net of silvery light flashing from the distance, appearing on the water ocean as it slowly made its way toward Ryuk. From afar away, he could already see the teleportation energy within and realized it was time to leave this realm. Even if I didn't reach the Astrocrowned realm, I at least reached the Cymancer stage, equivalent to the Dominion stage. One more step and my Aetheris energy cultivation would match that of my Ice Apex energy. That makes this journey worth it? Ryuk muttered to himself as the net of light reached him, and he made no effort to resist. His figure soon faded away as the net weaved completely through him, before dissipating into dust of light after he had long gone. When Ryuk opened his eyes next, he found himself in a fairly dim, silvery hall, and he didn't even need to look around to know he wasn't alone in the hall. There were many others present. It was quite the assembly. Closest to him were the Silverunic students who passed. A total of about 17 were still standing out of the 24 that formerly entered the realm. Seems like 7 Silverunics were lost to the test. He thought silently to himself but diverted his attention from the surrounding students to the others in the room. There were 18 standing. King Arimes, Queen Ilareth, the 10 elders, and a total of 5 of the ancient elders, including High Scholar Emeries, and then there was a singular lady, Instructor Kiana, who was their ether class teacher. When he looked at the faces of the elders, he could see signs of sadness, but then beneath that sadness were exhales of relief. Even the king had his hand clutched to his throne armrest as he laid his gaze on them. 17 of them survived. That's a lot compared to the average coming-of-age ceremony. And they included Filion and Alina too. That's very good. King Arimes silently thought to himself. Then he rose up from his throne, turning to look at them all still standing. Suddenly, sobs. The sound of sobbing filled the room as Ryuk turned a bizarre look to the side, only to find most of the students around him in tears, silently sobbing, while some had their hands clenched to fists, blood dripping out from how tight they gripped. Only a moment later did he understand. They had lost their classmates, people with whom they had been in class for close to 6 years of their lives. Gone so fast. They, of course, would be in tears over the loss. The only one who wasn't in tears in the room was Ryuk. He wasn't so easily moved anymore. Even the death of kids he had been around for a week couldn't shake his heart, and he didn't see much sense in faking it, so he silently remained still among them. The death of warriors will not be mourned. The king's voice filled with pressure, slammed into every corner of the hall, shaking the students up from their sobs. There are 2 ways to be a guardian, not one. Partake in the coming of age and return alive. That's the known way to all. But there's another way, and that is to partake and never return. All those who never return are automatic guardians and will be recorded as guardians on their grave monuments, laid to rest where the monument of the other ancient guardians are laid. All they have done is try to forge themselves into something better, to grow in order to stand with spines straight at the enemies of us, the Sulabrunis. And they have died with this noble aim just like any other guardian. They are warriors, whose wills will now be carried by the rest of all guardians that exist, most especially by those who had survived them. It's sad, I know, but they will not be mourned, only remembered and celebrated, he said, ending his words, the sobbing reducing a lot. For the 17 of you who have managed to return, I say congratulations to you all. You all will be given 3 days to regain your mental balance, and after that, you will be summoned to the Hall of Guardians where the passing warriors will be laid to eternal rest, and where you will be crowned with their responsibilities and become full-fledged guardians. The ceremony is as necessary as the coming of age itself. All must be there, he mused before he stepped down from the throne and made his way to the exit. But even though he had spoken so fearlessly and grandly, he still couldn't hide those singular red veins in his eyes that Ryuk knew were from anger and sadness. The Silverunics were a race that cared deeply about each other. That he at least knew from what was ongoing right now. The king was close to tears from some random Silverunic children's death, and how Filiana and Alina had pointed their weapons at him because he threw down a dangerous Silverunic into the abyss. When the king left with the elders and the ancient ones, the queen, along with Kiana, left with the remaining students, leaving just 2 people in the room. High Scholar Emeries, one of the ancients who didn't leave, and Ryuk, who remained standing on his feet. Their eyes looked into one another's for a time that felt very long before High Scholar Emeries sat upright from his seat. Return it. That was his first word, yet Ryuk's eyes held no ripple at all. He already knew there was no way an entire 2nd floor would disappear and High Scholar Emeries, the guardian, wouldn't know about it. The disappearance of the Techno-Void ruin is what allowed so many of the students to survive. Many of them would have died to that test, but with you taking it away, there was no longer a 2nd floor. So many of them automatically passed. This, I am grateful for, and therefore will be willing to ignore the fact that you tried at first to steal the Techno-Void ruin. I didn't steal anything. It was bestowed upon me rightfully by trial, Ryuk said without much debate. And when High Scholar Emeries looked into his eyes, He couldn't see the slightest flinch, meaning it was clear Ryuk wouldn't be giving it up so easily. Do you know how long the Techno-Void Ruin has been in the Gate of Soulless Ruin, youngling? Ever since I was a kid. 900 years plus more. It's been there, owned by us. As the guardian placed in charge of it, it is only rightful that I make sure no part of the Gate of Soulless Ruin is missing. Don't make me call you a thief, Ryuk, he said, his tone more forceful. But then Ryuk began walking forward toward him, stopping just a meter before him. I have a question for you, he said, perplexing High Scholar Emeries, whose eyes flashed as he asked, and what is that? Did you try to steal away my primordial gate when you operated on me during the infusion with the Anunnaki model? How did you know that? I was pretty sure you were deep in slumber when I tried to fuse with you. The model, High Scholar Emery said out loud in confusion, but then saw Ryuk's waiting eyes. I didn't steal your primordial gate. The presence of cultivating nodes in you might lead to unknown repercussions once you get fused with the Anunnaki model, as energies such as Aetherus or Apex could interfere in ways that can't be studied, too difficult to understand. To ensure a successful fusion, I had to make sure to remove the force that might try to interfere. So in short, you tried to cripple my cultivation, not caring for how long it must have taken me to reach such a level? Hey! I was doing that to ensure a successful integration. No, you were doing it to get rid of factors that might affect your study of me. Apex energy is too wild an energy and can relate with the Anunnaki model in ways that could be difficult for you to understand. So to make me easier to be studied like a lab rat, you decided to cripple me instead by stealing away my primordial gate. All for the sake of a successful study of how an ancient race body really works. Ryuk replied, voice calm yet incredibly loud, booming through the entire hall. Well, there was a 0.1% chance of successful removal of your primordial gate. If you had one, I would be able to obtain it in full, and when the time is right, I could have transferred it back to you. So there was a 99.9% chance of things going south and getting me crippled, which you were fine with, and proceeded to choose anyway. Is that supposed to make me less mad or something? You're talking in abstracts. You never had a primordial gate to begin with, and everything worked out just fine. Stop diverting the topic and return to me the Techno-Void Ruin. High Scholar Emery said with a scoff, if figuring out Ryuk was just trying to divert his attention from the Techno-Void Ruin, which was the original topic. But then he looked at Ryuk's stilled eyes and watched as they grew colder and colder and colder, until Ryuk's circular pupils suddenly elongated. It had changed to become the same iris as that of a reptilian creature. Tell me just one thing more, he whispered as he leveled his eyes to that of High Scholar Emery's, whose eyebrows furrowed. Where's your real body hiding? Ryuk asked, and High Scholar Emery's eyes widened to saucers before they morphed back to normal, and he laughed. Real body? Ha ha ha, what do? Vroom. In the next instant, the air flapped as Ryuk's form transitioned from standing straight into a punching motion, and his fist tore forward with horrific power, smashing straight into High Scholar Emery's face. And then, boom! It exploded forth like a watermelon as High Scholar Emery's head burst into pieces and his body was instantly sent flying off into the room, smashing against the hall wall and blasting all through it. The force was so strong, the collision resulted in part of the entire building tilting to the side and collapsing along with him. Various gasps could be heard from the Silverunics, whose hands covered their lips as they looked at the headless body in front of them. From the dust came walking out a figure, none other than Ryuk, who looked at High Scholar Emery's body. It didn't take long before his suspicions could be confirmed. The headless body began dissipating into little silvery star dots of light, and soon, they evaporated into nothing. Taking his gaze away, Ryuk looked into the distance, his eyes settling on the royal home. In the next instant, he turned towards it and resumed walking while ordering. Hey system, restore my primordial gate. He discovered it? Well, that's interesting. The calm words echoed through the silvery white lab, where various test tubes lay, along with funnels, all the things required for experimentation. There were different bubbling liquids of various colors around the strictly glass tables. Sitting in front of a tiny flame, a test tube in hand, stirring over the flame, was none other than High Scholar Emeries, whose eyes flashed as he looked at the test tube swirling in his hands. A positive reaction, he mused to himself before he turned the test tube to a test tube holder and placed it into it. Then, from his pockets, he brought out a telecommunication device and ordered, "Take down my experimentation, Ryuk. He has overridden control and is now heading towards my location." He commanded into the telecommunications device before he switched it off. His hand reached for a second test tube when they suddenly paused an inch away as he turned his head behind him, only to find a dark vortex rotating. And from within came the voice. "I'm already here." Ryuk stepped out of the portal, just 3 meters away from High Scholar Emeries, whose hand retreated from the test tube, and he slowly turned his full attention onto him. "That is the pulse of the Void Apex energy. So you really did possess a primordial gate. Perhaps you sensed my intent during the experimentation and chose to hide it away. I have never heard of such capability, even throughout my long years, but I'm not one to refuse possibilities." High Scholar Emeries said, as Ryuk looked at him, blank as ever, and in the next instant, a gigantic 100-meter void vortex appeared in the room, tearing apart and shattering the entire lab into nothing, along with various test tubes and chemicals, breaking everything while quickly clouding both Ryuk and High Scholar Emeries' figures. "Up! They're up!" The shout resounded as the door to the lab was kicked open, and storming in was none other than the ancient elders. But when they turned to look around the room, it was blank. Everything had disappeared, even some part of the walls, as if dragged away by some powerful suction force. And when an elder walked forward and ran his hand through the remnants present, his eyes closed for a while before they snapped open, a light flaring in them. Void energy. In a world filled with nothing but ancient, high-rising mountains and vast, unending skies. On the floor of their peaks, littering the ground, were cool, gentle green grass that danced to the rhythm of the passing wind. Everything radiated an aura of desolate peace, until suddenly, a bizarre ripple appeared as space seemed to collapse onto itself. Darkness from the void quickly materialized, and reappearing within this void were 2 figures. As the void inverted upon itself, it left only the 2 of them remaining, their visuals becoming clearer. A young man with exceptionally high-catching dual horns, and a silver-haired man, seemingly in his 50s, with an ancient light in his eyes. High Scholar Emeries paused as he looked at his surroundings. It was familiar ground to him, just a couple of kilometers away from the royalty home. Then he stared back at Ryuk, looking into his eyes before sighing. "What do you stand to gain, Ryuk? You know I wanted to remove your primordial gate, and that has made you mad. I understand anyone would. But you kept your primordial gate safe in the end. What does fighting me now do for you? Does it make the primordial gate you already have better? Or does it serve any particular use to you?" That was High Scholar Emeries' first question. Yet he watched Ryuk's body spasming unconsciously, as if he were a glitching computer. His hands and body bailing with unequal amounts of apex energy, a result of his true strength returning to him. "You tried to cripple me, to make me a better lab rat. I won't forgive that. Well, I also fused you with an exceptionally high-quality Anunnaki model, introduced you to Etheri cultivation, and now, with my help, you have succeeded in reaching the Psymancer stage. These are achievements you never would have been able to reach without me instructing Kiana to teach you about Etheris, or without me allowing you to enter the soulful ruin of Niagara. All of this I have done with my hands. And how have you repaid that? All you have done was make me a proper lab rat. Etheris would boost that, so you wanted me to train and enter the soulful ruin of Niagara and absorb more, so the fusion could proceed more successfully, and I could be well studied. All the good you have done is a lie. I see through it all. Well, that's not that much of a lie. I truly have kept you and given you all you have so I could understand how an Anunnaki model works. Although, you keep trying to change that into me, trying to turn you into a lab rat. But all of that has given you strength, hasn't it? You are the one gaining the advantages of it. Don't tell me you were this strong before the fusion with your model or before my help. All just to make me a better lab rat, Ryuk replied, his right eye glitching with a crimson light and his blue eye flickering with unstable energy. Seems like whatever I say, you will always just think it was for the sake of being a lab rat. Which it is? Ryuk replied, as High Scholar Emery's frowned and sighed, inhaling deeply and turning to the sky. Heavens no, since that war, I've refused to engage in any more battle. I'd rather the elders put you down than do it myself. But you've escaped them and come directly to me, giving me no choice. What I'm just curious about is, you spent close to a week in the royal home, and none told you of my prowess? High Scholar Emery said with a genuinely focused expression. Because if you had any idea what I am truly capable of, then I think you should have bided your time well. You knew I always suspected you would rebel, just like any robotic machination. They always rebel, and there must be a factor of rebelliousness that must always be considered. I knew this day would come, when you think you've grown too strong to be controlled. But just because you've reached the Psymancer stage and you are oozing with the apex energy of the Cataclysm stage, that is still not close to reaching my level at all. You should have bided more time, Ryuk. You should have waited more, to gather your strength secretly. Perhaps 6 more years, and you might have been an entertaining opponent. But right now, you're just a helplessly rebellious little robot. Well, at least I get to see your new current abilities. I guess it would be better this way, seeing it in a fight rather than simply asking. High Scholar Emery said, but all he saw was Ryuk standing in the same place. His right hand clenched into a fist, his face tilted to the sky, and his body rippling in the nearby space, as if he were unstable. And that was when the bizarre ripple from Ryuk began spreading outward. It came pulsing out from his heart, rippling toward the entire area, passing through High Scholar Emery's, whose eyes furrowed at the waves. One thing came to his mind. Heavy. I only have 10 minutes, so I will be going all out. I would advise you to do the same, Ryuk said. High Scholar Emery's eyes flashed with light as he noticed something peculiar. Even his words are suddenly heavy? What is with this new heaviness? Congratulations. Host has awakened a new skill upon breaking through to the Psymancer stage. Congratulations. Host on awakening a second Draconic Bloodline skill. Skills and abilities. Subgroup, Draconic Supremacy. Skill name, Draconic Overdrive. LV.1. Type, Transformation, Forbidden. Description, a fledgling manifestation of one of the ultimate skills of a Jade Dragon. Allows the user to tap into a fragment of their ancestral might, triggering a partial transformation. Effects limited to level 1. Basic transformation, 2 times original size, covered in powerful defensive jade scales. Stat boost, STR/AGI/END, increased by an additional 10%, an extra 100 points. Hey system. Yes. Input 30 ability upgrade cards into Draconic Overdrive. Congratulations on leveling up Draconic Overlord to level 30. Activate Draconic Overlord. Ryuk ordered instantly and immediately. Like a god pressing a burning thumb against the sky, Ryuk's body erupted. A pulse of haze and azure lightning shot from the heavens, blasting down with power so immense that space itself failed to hold together, shattering as if it were but a nuisance. Then, it struck Ryuk with the force of a dying star. Kaboom! The ground beneath him fissured, tearing open as the mangled remnants of a radius of 200 meters instantly tore downward with speed, slamming onto the ground and leading to more fissures. From outside, High Scholar Emirs felt the roar. A roar that was neither fully human nor beastly, but something older and fiercer, ripped out from his throat. The sound warped the air, sending a shockwave rustling through the entire grassland for miles. Then the change began. Ryuk's glowing skin instantly split apart, blue light erupting from the fractures, as the Anunnaki sigils beneath his skin flared to life. Ancient runes suddenly appeared, carving themselves into every inch of his form. From within, something began emerging, blue-colored scales that moved outward from Ryuk's body, quickly aligning together and coating his entire frame. From behind him, It was as if a sword had torn out from within. A soft hissing sound accompanied the appearance of slits behind Ryuk's back, his back folding into itself, and then, burst. A magnificent flare of blue fire burst out as an object ripped forth from Ryuk's back, elongating into the air. The objects were two monstrous appendages, one a dragon's wing of living obsidian scales, radiating a powerful blue glow, while the other seemed more like a mechanical horror of humming plasma veins. A single beat of the wings shattered the surrounding space, sending debris tumbling beneath the abyss that had already formed upon the ground. Then, his body instantly began expanding. His heart began pounding like a stellar engine, surpassing 2,000 beats per minute. The sheer force of it sent shockwaves through the earth, kicking up dust in concentric rings. A white-hot aura exploded outward, slamming against High Scholar Emeries, who took steps backward in shock as his eyes locked onto the void that had come before him. He watched as the light cleared, revealing the new entity. Where Ryuk once stood, there was now only a titan. A 50-meter-tall titan, draped in blue draconic scales with two gigantic wings draped in living obsidian and Anuki steel. Every breath Ryuk took ignited into plasma. The land around him had died from the aura alone, the sky having been ripped apart as if reality could no longer contain him. Ryuk set his sights on High Scholar Emirs. His eyes were now fully vertical, burning with golden flames that sent a crippling aura of supremacy toward anyone who dared meet his gaze. And then, he finally rose up, his shifting form aligning together, the scales tightening around each other as the dripping fluid left him, revealing a being that was the epitome of a combination between warlord and supremacy. Ryuk raised his gaze away from High Scholar Emirs, looking at his hands, which had formed into enormous claws. Their parts were covered in seamless jade scales, but their edges were gleaming cerulean steel at the tips, seemingly sharper than the best weapon Ryuk had ever seen. Not even his Abyssal Reaper scythe would resist being crumbled into nothing with but a single slash of these claws. Then, he turned his attention back to High Scholar Emirs. "Did no one tell me of your achievements, you ask?" Ryuk's voice, following his transformation, was surprisingly and unervingly crisp and clear, not at all haunting to the ears. Every word carved directly into High Scholar Emery's heart. "I have heard of how you're a prodigy in all aspects. Dimensional control, will control, Ilzions? You were a master in every area of Etheris, able to create new runic inscriptions, and that at a young age too. I heard you have even discovered a new path of Etheris cultivation. The power of imagination, isn't it?" Ryuk asked, his lips forming a monstrous grin as the sides of his cheeks instantly split open, revealing sharp, steel-like teeth. His jaws split into a maw of steel teeth, stretched into a grin too wide for a human face as High Scholar Emirs watched the intense battle intent burning within those pupils. "I heard it all, High Scholar Emeries. You're an anomaly just like I am. And now I want to see who is greater." In 1 second, Ryuk was standing 20 meters away, and in the next, he stood where High Scholar Emirs was, and as for High Scholar Emirs, boom! Ryuk's eyes glinted as he watched him smashing straight into mountains with speed that would make even a pseudo-eternal stage expert jealous. The mountains dispersed into dust once High Scholar Emir's body collided with them, unstoppably. After exactly 5 kilometers, he finally managed to pause, his eyes flashing in half-shock and disbelief as he looked at his clothes, already reduced to rags from the sheer power. His physical strength. It is beyond anything, High Scholar Emiris thought in shock. Yet, when he opened his eyes, kaboom! The ground a kilometer away shattered into nothingness, becoming an endless abyss. Then, the unstoppable legs began stepping forward, none other than Ryuk, his golden gaze locked directly onto him. "If you don't go all out, Emeries, you'll be dying faster than you think?" Ryuk's voice rang out clearly, his tone more of a statement than a threat as he took calm steps toward him, not at all in a hurry to finish him off. And instead of anger, Ryuk's expression was surprisingly calm and free, an expression of expectant excitement rather than lust for blood. For that reason, High Scholar Emeries inhaled sharply. He stood silently for a while, with eyes closed, before they instantly snapped open, and a fearsome, devilish grin split his face ear to ear as he looked at the approaching Ryuk, whose grin widened even more. Yes, that's it right there. The real Emery's von Lauren. Hey hey hey. Come kid. Let me indulge you a bit. Ha ha ha. Uncontrollable laughter bloomed from Ryuk's lips as his second foot touched the ground. And then, kaboom! The entire ground beneath him tilted backwards as his body shot forward with terrifying speed, space ripping apart around him. In an instant, he appeared before Emery's, his claws lashing downward with force enough to drown the world in destruction. Yet, Emery's didn't even look at it. His hand moved to his face, fingers snapping together before he whispered, "Etherumalus forbidden." The word resonated at a frequency that instantly shattered the space around them, bending light and sound. Ryuk felt the air solidify, as if reality itself was holding its breath. Time stretched thinner than an infinite landscape. And then Emery's began an unknown change. It all started with the remnants of his clothes fading away into nothing. Following closely was his own skin, peeling off like burning parchment, dispersing into floating etherous runes that swirled around him like a storm of dying stars. His bones fractured, splitting into infinite geometric patterns before collapsing into a singularity of thought. From the void left behind, his new body emerged, a skeletal frame with a core woven from glowing etherous equations. His ribcage was a cage of fractal geometry, each bone a self-writing theorem that altered reality by its mere existence. His right arm was a living writing brush, its edge dripping dark blood for ink, while his left arm was a branching fractal blade, radiating a piercing aura of destruction. His legs no longer existed. Below his torso was a vortex of screaming faces, his upper body balancing atop it. Both of his eyes were missing, and in their place were two black holes that sucked in all light. His jaw unhinged like a serpent's, but instead of fangs, there was only a dark, yawning abyss, shadows dispersing out from it. His form had shifted from a once scholarly figure into a living paradox. "You've grown, Ryuk." Faster than I theorized, the voice came, a chorus of 1,000 dead entities as High Scholar Emery's turned his hollow, abyssal eyes toward him. "But you still don't understand. I don't control dimensions." Ryuk's eyes flashed as he noticed a bizarre aura unfolding around Emery's body, bringing with it a chilling sensation of impending doom that began drowning his senses. "I am them. Etherumalus forbidden." Unfurling of Iatinia dimension. High Scholar Emery's brush hand moved, drawing a single line in the space between them. In that instant, Ryuk witnessed something unbelievable. The ground beneath him ceased to exist, not destroyed, but erased from conceptual possibility, along with space and air itself. He fell into a void of absolute nothingness, where even time itself was seemingly incapable of existence, leaving him lost and confused. Where is this? He wondered aloud, staring into the endless darkness. The void wasn't cold, neither warm, it was nothing. He couldn't see his own body. It was as if the void had wrapped around him, depriving him of every sense that existed. Yet, Ryuk's eyes flared into fiery blue light as he focused his gaze. A sharp, crisp sound tore through the void, the first sound in eons. Ryuk clenched his fist. He couldn't see, but he could feel it. His body, along with all of his might, had not been deprived of him and still under his control. And being the only thing he could feel, it was like the key he needed to get out of here. An unbearably powerful wave of energy burst from Ryuk's body as his hands clenched into fists. With a roar, he punched upward with all his might, smashing straight into the abyssal darkness. Boom! Creak! In that instant, he felt resistance, something struggling to hold him back. But hold him back? Hold Ryuk back? Ryuk roared again, his eyes blazing like twin infernos as his fist shattered through the resistance, revealing a window where reality could still be seen. In the next moment, his second hand snapped forward, claws gripping the edge of the void. And then, the sound of glass shattering echoed as Ryuk pulled the dimension apart like paper, tearing through it as he looked down to find High Scholar Emery standing below, his mouth twisting into a mocking smirk. "Good one, Emerys, but not enough to take me down." Ryuk's body flickered. He vanished from the torn dimension, appearing instantly behind Emery's before slashing down with devastating speed. The air in the path of his claws warped instantly into nothingness. Yet High Scholar Emery's reacted in an instant, slashing out with his fractal blade. Reality itself split where claw and blade passed, the two forces surging toward each other before finally, kaboom! A deafening collision erupted as claw and blade met, the world around them crumbling into nothing but an endless void again. Yet, Ryuk's eyes only gleamed more. Crack! The sound of fractures rang out as High Scholar Emery's eyes flashed, watching his blade begin to splinter. But then his gaze sharpened. Vroom! Space itself twisted as Ryuk's second hand moved. His claw surged forward, aimed straight for Emery's skull. Yet, in that same instant, High Scholar Emery's flashed, and reappeared a kilometer away, his eyes flaring with light. "His physical might is beyond me. I can't afford a close combat," he silently thought, but then quickly refocused his gaze. Ryuk took a step, boom, and shot forward with world-breaking speed. But before he could reach him, Emery's brush hand moved even faster, drawing runes and symbols in the air with impossible speed before his lips parted and the chilling chorus once more began. Etherumalus forbidden, Imaginio, canvas of unreality, distance exemplario. In the next instant those words were uttered, Emery's brush swirled, painting a ruined horizon as Ryuk felt himself still soaring towards High Scholar Emery's, but it didn't take long for him to notice the one anomaly. And that was that no matter how hard he ran, he never really reached him. It was like the concept of distance has been erased between him and Emery's, but Emery's was only beginning as Ryuk watched his hand of a brush extended forward, and then he began to quickly draw with a bizarre feverish light in his eye's skull, his grin widening more sadistically with every stroke. "I have to end this." In the next instant, Ryuk made his choice. "Activate Void Vortex," he ordered, and true to his will, the technique instantly activated. He immediately stepped into it. Yet when he stepped outside, his eyes flashed in perplexion as he looked around and found out that he was still standing exactly where he had left. "What's wrong?" he muttered, and in the next instant, he reactivated Void Vortex, only to step in and step out back to where he had started. "The space has been locked down?" he thought confusedly, but then watched as High Scholar Emery's delivered the last strike of his brush hands, before he slowly lowered his hands back to the ground and turned to look at Ryuk, shaking his head at him. "You're dead. You just don't know it yet." "Imaginio, weight of the forgotten," Emery's uttered, and in the next instant, crack, the sound of knees cracking, resounded before. Ryuk's kneecap shattered instantly into nothing as his legs immediately buckled. His eyes flashed in horror at the weight pressing down on him, as he felt the gravity seemingly increase by a factor of 10,000, wanting to crush him from the inside as he was slammed down into the ground. The earth swiftly lit with cracks beneath, but then the word rang out once more. "Imaginio, unbirth," Emery's uttered, and in that moment, Ryuk felt the sensation that enveloped him. In an instant, he watched as his draconic scales suddenly began peeling away like old paint, his claws retreating back into human skin. His heart, which was beating incredibly fast, slowed down to a crawl. His gigantic wings behind him withdrew into themselves before the slits on his back closed up, and that was when Ryuk truly felt the weight. In an instant, crack, the sound of bones gruesomely shattering echoed out as he was pressed flat into the ground. His teeth clenched hard as he felt the full force of an increase in gravity by 10,000x. "My technique, it's been unfurled. Like I never activated it in the first place." The thought echoed in his head through the pain, but that was when real understanding dawned on him as he remembered Emery's words. "Imaginio, weight of the forgotten. Imaginio, unbirth." When he called out the first word, gravity increased by 10,000x. And when he called the second, my draconic transformation unfurled, and I returned to what he knew. In his head, the image of me after fusing with the Anunnaki model came back. Could this be it? His power of imagination. Emery's twists imagination with the combination of Etherius and his will to affect his opponents. The realization instantly dawned, yet Ryuk was barely able to put it to use when he instantly heard the words. Imaginio, nanotech puppetry, High Scholar Emery said, and in the next instant, Ryuk's body writhed under the force as he felt his own nanobody suddenly undergoing changes beyond his will. And then, bang! Intense gasps left Ryuk's lips when he felt his own hand morphed into a gigantic nanoclaw, sinister in scale, its grip closing around his throat. As Ryuk's other hand moved to try and stop it, movement failed. His second hand instead grabbed at his head and began tightening on his skull. Ah, Ryuk! The voice echoed aloud as he looked through the gap of his fingers, looking at High Scholar Emery's, who descended before him. You're strong, Ryuk, especially your draconic bloodline. The might of it feels like it can never be buried to the ground, you know? High Scholar Emery said seemingly in praise, but the mocking grin came just as fast. But the truth is, even dragons will drown in enough rain. High Scholar Emery said as Ryuk felt the grip on his throat and skull increasingly fold, squeezing him of the remnant of life as blood poured down the corner of his lips. Yet, from the pain, Emery's watched as the boy's pained expression slowly morphed into a smile. Who? He forced out from the struggle. All I was capable of was Dra gone, he asked in mockery. And in the next instant, High Scholar Emery's instantly turned behind him as he watched a gigantic vortex suddenly manifest behind him, and from within came in claw, pitch black in color, with writhing furs sharper than steel. And instantly, it slashed toward High Scholar Emery's, tearing the surrounding space with its power. Kaboom! A groan of pain left High Scholar Emery's lips as he was slapped deep into the void, and that one moment of disorientation was all Ryuk needed to break apart the hold of the grasp on his throat. And he instantly ordered two commands. Return back, Void. Activate Sovereign Rewriting. In the instant, the claw retreated back into the void before the vortex also fade away, and instantly the world around Ryuk changed massively. The former void had been repelled, and he saw tiny streaks of dark blood tailing the entire area. It was the inks that were coating High Scholar Emery's brushes, but it seemed it had infected the entire world. This is how his imagination affects the world. With the aid of the runes he had been writing before, he turned the entire area into a painting canvas of his. It works similar to an apex domain, one where all of his imagination will come to life with just a word. Ryuk's brain quickly analyzed, and a moment later he ordered, Hey system, pour all of my remaining ability upgrade cards to Sovereign Rewriting. Congratulations, host. Sovereign Rewriting has leveled up to level 20. Immediately, golden splashes of light appeared around Ryuk as his hands instantly stretched outwards, pulling the bonds between these dark bloods, destroying them into nothing with his will. The dark inks around Ryuk were the first to break, and instantly the force of gravity that held him tight was erased immediately. Then it began unfurling outwards toward High Scholar Emery's, whose eyes flashed in horror. My control! It's being dissipated? How? He thought in shock, but was instantly brought back when he watched a powerful explosion of energy rock out from Ryuk as his blue Draconis scales instantly reappeared on his body. His wings tore out from behind, and with a single flap, Ryuk disappeared into space before instantly appearing before High Scholar Emery's, their eyes mere inches away. Your mundane imagination won't take me down, Ryuk said out loud, and in the next instant, his claws pierced outwards, ripping through High Scholar Emery's ribcage and tearing out straight from behind him. A roar of pain erupted, followed by dark blood splashing out of Emery's maw as he looked up into Ryuk's golden burning eyes, the remnants of life leaving his body as Ryuk activated a second skill. Cryo-Eternal Devourer. Absorbs thermal energy, turning foes into frozen husks. Your imagination technique is not supreme. Neither is this body you're using, Ryuk said. I don't know how you got the brush that you turned into your arm, but I can guess it's an art. And all you do is combine your bizarre dark Aetheris power with your brush to paint your will onto the world. It allows you to summon your imagination into effect after turning the realm to yours with your brush canvas. But I can sense it. Every imagination of yours drains a massive amount of energy. And for some reason, I can sense that you had the power to finish me with one imagination. But fear prevented. Not just of one thing, but two things. First, you're scared of close combat with me, probably because your body won't last much against me, meaning your art is not a physically strengthened one. And second, because using an imagination that could outright kill me will take too much energy. Energy that's probably enough to take your life in return. And for some reason, you have a very low amount of energy compared to what you should have. At least, compared to the amount of energy I've been told you have, Ryuk said, as more dark blood splashed out from High Scholar Emery's before he grinned wildly and replied, "Opening the Gate of Soul's Ruin takes 30% of my energy, and opening the Soulful Ruin of Niagara takes 40%. That's 70%, and I won't be gaining them back until 3 years from now. If I had that, I would have simply decided you were never awake, and you would have fallen asleep the second this battle started, never waking up until I've conducted all my research on your abilities. Call me weak, but don't say I lack imagination," High Scholar Emery said, as Ryuk scoffed, removing his hand from his heart just before he could completely suck out the man's entire life force as he grabbed him by his neck. "No, you're just foolish to allow yourself to use so much energy when you knew we could rebel at any time. You're too confident in yourself. So confident, you think that clone of yours would have succeeded to keep me at bay, or you would have been more cautious. And that's the reason for your death," Ryuk said, his left arm winding backward as he prepared his claws. "Well, do it pretty fast. My granddaughters are coming with their father. I'd rather not have my death scene be the last thing they see," High Scholar Emery said just as Ryuk's eyes flashed, turning to the void, and true to the man's words, silvery light figures instantly tore through the air area of the void, eyes scanning the surrounding before pausing onto Ryuk's figure, their eyes flashing with shock and horror. You bastard!" King Ormais roared out loud as he launched himself forward with speed. But just before he could cover half-length, Ryuk's calm voice rang out. "My claws will cleave through his skull faster than you can reach me." The words ran directly in King Orimi's heart as his speed slowed down. But it only slowed as he continued with speed toward Ryuk, only to be held back by 3 ancient elders who struggled to hold him back, while holding angered expressions themselves, but they knew well, Ryuk's words were true. High Scholar Emery's life force was undulating so weakly that even a person half Ryuk's current power will have no problem ending him. "You ungrateful bastard! All of the help we have given you. We allowed you to join the coming-of-age ceremony. We allowed you to enter our most sacred grounds, the soulful ruin of Niagara. We allowed you to stay in the same class and learn of our ways with our younglings. We allowed you and even had a meeting on the suggesting for you to be allowed to become one of our realm's guardians in 3 days from now. And what are you doing? Anything a robot would have done. I knew you were nothing more than that. I always felt it." King Orimi's roared out in Ryuk's face as the elders struggled to hold him back with energy symbols locking down his movement and forming a barrier around him. Yet his aura only got wilder and wilder as more elders joined in to hold him back. "It was never about your race. It was always about him and me," Ryuk said, turning his attention back to High Scholar Emery's, whose transformation began reverting back. Ryuk watched as his body turned back into that of a normal form. But this time he had undergone change. For once, the scholar's previously youthful face had gone wrinkled, and his body had become thin and frail. "Grandpa!" The childish cry rang out as tears streamed from Eliana's face, looking at her grandfather in those sklay arms. To her, he had always been a hero. And truthfully, to every single Silverunix, her grandfather, Emerys von Loren, had always been a hero to the Silverunic race. But to watch him frail and dying in those arms, when she turned to look at Ryuk, who also turned to look at her, streaks streamed from her eyes. I never meant to call you a monster. I'm sorry. I truly am. Please, "Don't kill my grandfather too," she said, sobbing. But the words were what she was to Ryuk, the cry of a dumb, desperate child. "One thing," Ryuk said, as he turned to look at High Scholar Emeries, who opened his eyes. "What is that?" "An energy core reactor," Ryuk said, as the ancient elders' faces sizzled in confusion, while High Scholar Emery's eyes flashed in shock. "An energy core reactor? The energy within is that of a mini-sun. Why would you need an energy core reactor?" High Scholar Emery's asked, and Ryuk's hand swung instantly as he reached for his head. All he wanted was a reason not to kill him, and now that that has failed, he could have what his heart truly desired, killing the one who turned him to a lab rat. But mere inches before his claws could reach it, an incredibly bright bulb of energy undulated forth, causing Ryuk's arm to pulse as he felt an incredibly powerful radiation of energy. The elders all turned to the source, and they watched. It was none other than the queen, who was holding a single glowing gem the size of an egg floating in her hands. "My queen, that is our royal home's power core. It powers our entire city, its defense and offensive systems, the lighting, and even the city protection runes." "What are you doing, Eilertith?" King Ormais said, but they were all ignored as the queen walked right past them, appearing 5 meters away from Ryuk. "Here's the energy core reactor you want. It still has 95% of its energy left," she said to Ryuk, who looked at the energy core before turning to look at High Scholar Emery's, burning light of fury in his eyes. But in the end, his claws finally released as Queen Eilerith moved, picking up High Scholar Emery's before he could fall further into the void. Ryuk's hand reached for the energy core, his eyes flashing as the golden panel appeared before his gaze. Then he turned to look at the Silver Runics who had already gathered to the side of High Scholar Emery's, their eyes looking at Ryuk, a mixture of shock, fury, hate, and some bit of gratefulness. "You're lucky you're a good man to your race." Those words were the last thing that was heard before a bizarre, gray-white Aetheris vortex suddenly appeared before Ryuk. It moved forward, swallowing him within, and in that instant, Ryuk faded away from the place as if he was never there to begin with. High Scholar Emery's eyelids grew heavier from exhaustion as he was slowly carried off, yet his gaze still locked onto the place where Ryuk had left, a flash in his eyes. 10 minutes, huh? Now I understand. Do you? Welcome back, Trial Taker. You have successfully obtained the reward of the first trial, the soulful ruin of Niagara. You have now become worthy of being given the entrance token. The voice echoed through a simple hall, with nothing but gray and white-colored pillars all around. Standing in it was a singular entity, Ryuk. In front of him was a card that slowly floated before Ryuk, whose palms spread, and the card gently landed in their center. His eyes stared at it for long, but they only looked at it. "You already know the soulful ruin of Niagara was the main goal?" the system asked as Ryuk nodded. "Yes, I felt it the second I came out of the soulful ruin of Niagara. I can feel the familiar teleportation energy of the ruin of Morta Niagara, and it would catch up in 10 minutes. 10 minutes before you're teleported out of the Silverunic royal home," the system replied, realization dawning to it. But then Ryuk felt the ruin words echoing out once more. The entrance card is a ticket that will allow the trial taker to gain access to what will be the second level of the ruin of Morta Niagara in the future, if the trial taker was ever lucky or doomed to chance upon one in the future. The first level of the Morta Niagara ruin in here has been completed. Trial taker will now be taken out. The ruin's words rang out, and in the next instant, the gray-white corridor speared once more, swallowing Ryuk's figure. He didn't resist, allowing the ruin energy to completely cover him. And when next he opened his eyes, he was outside the large, silvery gray gate, the desert sand blowing beneath his feet. The sound of heavy shutting rang out as Ryuk turned behind him to find the sight of the huge gray door that led to the realm shattering into motes of gray light. Soon, they completely dispersed into the air, leaving just Ryuk in the wide expanse desert. In the next instant, Ryuk took the deepest inhale of his life as he took in the amazing breath of air, an overwhelming feeling of nostalgia filling his heart. And when next he opened his eyes, A smile bloomed on his face. I am back home. Finally, Ryuk mused to himself, his smile enduring for about a minute as he kept smiling foolishly like a kid. Well, I feel like I need to correct you about End-Earth not really being your world. But I guess I can allow you to drown a bit in your fantasy after all. It's been so long after all. Well, at least thank you for reminding me of it. And taking away half the joy, Ryuk said with an eye roll, and he could swear he heard the system laughing evilly to itself. A hum escaped Ryuk's lips as he turned to the side and found an object beeping within the golden sand, and he made his way toward it. Stretching his hands, the object rose up from the ground and floated, landing in Ryuk's grasp, whose eyes furrowed at it. A communication device? He wondered to himself as he turned on the device, only to find it a map, and on it was a beeping red light. Astralaxia. Seems like she got out before me. She placed a tracker on herself to enable you to find her? That's quite the improvement. And suspicious too. The system notification flashed as Ryuk nodded his head. But it made quite the sense too. The last time he was being chased and had a bounty on his head, and that strengthened their bond. They both knew they were stuck in this together. It made sense for her to want Ryuk to know her location then. She could have left a normal communication device so he could call her, but that was probably trackable already, so the best thing was to leave her own communication device. It was alien and couldn't be tracked, ensuring Ryuk's safety. I understand, Astralaxia. I'll find you soon, Ryuk said as the communication device disappeared, stored into his shop, and then he inhaled in deep breaths, his heartbeat increasing within his ribs before he finally called out. Come out, Void, Ryuk whispered, and in the next instant, a gigantic vortex appeared in the air right before Ryuk. As Ryuk waited, pillar-like legs filled with shining dark fur stepped out of the realm. It came to stand before him, the vortex fading away, yet Ryuk was unable to raise his head up. He had no idea how to redeem himself. He had abandoned Void during the entirety of his time in the Metasla world, never bringing him out once. Not like he could until he was able to unlock his primordial gate, but even after then, he never really called out Void, instead engaging in battle with High Scholar Emeries and only summoning him to temporarily free himself. It was a sign of uncaring. And now that Void was standing before him, he didn't know what to say. How do you feel, Ryuk? The words suddenly echoed out as Ryuk's eyes, looking into the ground, widened into saucers, and his neck snapped open to look at Void, who was easily towering over him with his height of 5 meters. You can... How? Ryuk tried to say out the words, stuttering in his shock. But it was greater than anything he could say. Void was talking to him, and it wasn't usual talk where it was telepathical. Void's words were coming out its lips. The shock subsided when Ryuk looked at Void, and he noticed there wasn't much joy in those intelligent eyes. Only a deep calm, neither excited nor interested. I'm sorry, Void. I asked how you felt, Void replied as Ryuk's eyes furrowed, brows tightening, and he opened his lips. I feel guilty. You should. Did Isha not tell you we can see the outside world through your eyes? Void asked as Ryuk's eyes flashed. And I watched everything that happened to you, and lied to myself that one of the reasons you couldn't get me out was because unlocking your primordial gates would bring us harm. But when you finally unlocked your primordial gate, I wasn't the first thing that came to your mind. It was your battle with High Scholar Emeries. And you only summoned me when you were in a pinch before sending me back right after. Right then, I don't know what more lies I can tell myself. When I summoned you temporarily, it was because you were the only one who could have temporarily helped me in that moment. And I summoned you back just as fast because I was worried you would get injured in a battle of such scale. As for not summoning you first when I got back my primordial gate, I only had 10 minutes to straighten things out before I'm teleported away from the Metasla world. So, I was of less attention then, or I don't deserve those 10 minutes of yours, Void said as Ryuk softly shook his head. No, it was because, compared to giving you my first 10 minutes or giving you my lifetimes, I'd rather choose a lifetime instead. The skirmish between me and High Scholar Emeries took 10 minutes and it's ended now. But the relationship between me and you will last for a lifetime now. That's not something High Scholar Emerys could be able to get, even if he gave an arm and leg for it. And it's what I chose for you, he said, as Void's eyes furrowed, thinking deeply about it. But Ryuk didn't allow it to think about it much longer. And of course, I understand my crime. So, in order to compensate, I have decided to get this for you. Take it as a compensation gift, if you will, Ryuk said as he opened his palms, and something appeared within. A huge cube filled with void energy, and immediately Void sat, its eyes widening to saucers as Ryuk watched the drool escape the wide-open mouth of his. So, what do you think of it, Void? Let's bury the little misunderstanding behind us in the past. Ryuk said as Void's eyes twinkled with suspicion before it finally groaned. I know what you're doing, Ryuk. Fortunately for you, I don't mind. Void said, and before anyone could blink, Void was already crunching the Void cube dish, a steady purring expression leaving its lips as Ryuk rubbed his huge tummy. There, that's the Void I know, Ryuk said, as Void released more purring sounds, unable to hold its anger any longer as Ryuk rubbed it out of it, and soon it was all over him with its huge tongue. Hey, you're drowning me? He protested, when it left the customary drool over him as Void bounded off, grinning sinisterly at him. Ryuk was soaked from head to toe in its tongue drill and looked quite pathetic. But it was only for a moment as Ryuk twirled his body, getting rid of the drools, and then snow oozed out from his body, seemingly bathing him in its freshness as the soot and stain on Ryuk's body from the previous battle with High Scholar Emerys faded away, and he brought out a new set of clothes. A brand new blue-white set of clothes, no different from the one he had before quickly donning it on. And once more his looks changed from one who seemed to have been through hell to seemingly divine emissaries from heaven itself. Now, there's just one more person, Ryuk muttered to himself before immediately. His hand reached by his side, and he willed it open. Immediately, a vortex appeared before Ryuk, but this time oozing with an aura that made Void's eyes flash. Such amount of void energy. The cat thought to himself, and they both watched as a leg stepped forth from within the depths of the vortex, reaching out before stepping completely out as the vortex instantly closed back in. The figure was a tall man, about 5 meters in height, bare-chested, revealing the scars that painted him, while flowing crimson hair flapped around his head. His dual eyes of gray and crimson stared at Ryuk before a grin tugged at the corner of his lips. You've grown taller than I remember, and what's with the horns? That was the man's first words as he looked at Ryuk, who exhaled, but then his eyes focused as he looked at him. This was, of course, Antares, the one he had fought with in the Niagara First level, but whose life he had chosen not to kill, instead placing into the Void Azura Rift. Ryuk had of course not forgotten about the man, and now when he finally got back to the real world, he brought him out just as he had promised. Growth happens. Hope you didn't mind the time in that place, Ryuk said as the man grinned. Who am I to complain about it? It gave me time to review our last fight and work on how I could defeat that ultimate attack of yours. It was just what I needed, Antares said to Ryuk, who nodded. Well, here it is, my world. End Earth, Ryuk said, as Antares turned his gaze upwards to the sky, shutting his eyes for a moment before his eyes flashed as he turned to look at Ryuk. The energy construction and source energy. It's a wild world, he said, and Ryuk shrugged. That's not the first time I'm hearing that, so I guess it's kinda true. Your world? You don't radiate the same source energy, Antares replied as Ryuk nodded. It's a long story, but it's my world. And just as I promised, I'll free you here. You can decide to live and go find wherever you came from. Nothing would hold you back. But if you decide to stay for some time, then I'll need you to sign a contract grimoire that ensures you cannot harm anyone who sees the source energy of this world for as long as you stay here. And what if I decide to stay by your side? Antares asked as Ryuk's eyebrows knitted. What? When I was locked within that realm, how many years has it been? 200 years, 300 years? I can't even remember. My world was destroyed, along with warriors of my entire race. I was able to transfer some of my people to another world at the last minute, but even I don't know where I sent them or how they're even doing now. I accepted myself to have died, in your hands. But now that I'm alive, I have no world to run to. But I already knew of that fact and reminded myself of it for 200 or more years. That's enough time to recover from it. So why not hang around you instead? Seems like you could use a companion, especially one who used your butt to wipe the ground not long ago. Antares said with a mocking smirk. That was before. You won't be wiping my butt on the ground anymore. Ha ha ha. Still sore from the loss? Ha ha. My axes are ready anytime you are. Antares said with a wild grin as Ryuk waved him off. No, not in the mood. I just came back. I have to check the state of things first. If you want to stay by my side, then no need for a contract grimoire. My eyes will be on you anyway. Sounds good. I will be in the Void Ruin. Still got a couple of healing sessions to do to get back to my full strength, and I can feel I'm close to a breakthrough. Antares said quite seriously, and Ryuk shrugged before he reopened the Azura Void Rift for him and he stepped into it. You can summon me when you get in a pinch. I might be able to get some exercise while doing that, he said before he entered into the Void Gate, which closed behind him. Ryuk inhaled and exhaled before he turned to the Void, standing leisurely to the side. Now Void, we check on the state of the world. Has the third Null Gate opened? How many days have passed? And also, we get to check on Isha too, Ryuk said, and he watched as Void's humongous 5 meters tall height, which quickly reduced in and shrunk to just about a few centimeters tall, and it disappeared, only to reappear on his right shoulder. And in the next instant, Ryuk slowly lifted himself off the ground before he began a beam of light moving into the far distance. One thing Ryuk could notice was, even though his current level of strength was about 3 times the previous times when his travel would rupture the stronghold of space, surprisingly, the space around him was only sliding into fragments as he traveled. It was just rippling, and that was because he could now absolutely control every ounce of strength he used. He made sure in his flight to manipulate the gravity an inch around him, just enough not to shatter space around him. A vast improvement from his previous barbaricness where space would have been blown into a void by his mere passing. He felt himself in control now, and he could swear he loved this new form of his. The form where he felt every ounce of his strength under his control. So, with your skirmish with High Scholar Emeries, the system said as Ryuk's eyes settled on the panel. And what's with that? Well, you eventually let the man go when he was right there in your palm. His death just a slash away. Why did you let him go? I was pretty sure you had already set your mind to end him when you unlocked your primordial gate. The system asked as Ryuk's eyes lit in slight fury when he remembered the scene. But in the end, they softened. I let him go. Because he was more than a scientist. More than a scientist? Ryuk, he tried to cripple you. Take away your primordial gate. If he had succeeded, he would have taken everything, your pet world, Void, your world tree, your ice cultivation power, and your Void cultivation power. This fusion that you have with the Anunnaki model could have cost you your life, and it took away all of your previous nanotech skills. Even though one might argue you are better off now, the truth remains. You had a 99% chance of dying ever since you got into his palms. He was a scientist, an evil one, through and through, the system said, as Ryuk clenched his hand into a fist before he released them. That's true, but he's also a father that is respected, a grandfather that is beloved, and a hero that is looked up to by millions. He experimented on me, yes, that is wrong and unacceptable. But the truth is, if I had killed him, what would that have done? What advantage would that have brought me? Other than feeding my ego. Besides, he has just lost 70% of his true energy, his true power. Does beating up an old man who is 70% crippled feed my ego? I would have left the Metasla world right after. And you think his son, King Arimes, would let things slide like that? What of his 2 daughters who watched their grandfather die before their eyes? The rage, the helplessness of watching their beloved, murdered right in front of them. The ancient elders who held Ormais back from interfering, they would be blamed for life by him, and they would also harbor nothing but hate. If the truth was revealed to the Silverunics, they would harbor nothing but hate, and all they would see is not a boy who got experimented on unrighteously, but an ungrateful machine kid who they tried to make one of them only to get stabbed in the back by. He might just be one man, but he carries the faith of millions, and so the hate of millions too. Crossing the Silverunics was never a choice of mine in the first place. I never thought I would go to a different world and meet with a different race. But that also means we can cross paths in the future. I'd rather cross paths with them and have them indebted than have them find me one day, burning with revenge, Ryuk replied. And yet your eyes still burn with fury? The system said, as Ryuk kept quiet, flying forward silently. I'm angered because I deviated from my plan, one that I had harbored since the beginning. I spared him when I had already sworn I would end him. This is the first time I've had to change my plan so abruptly because of placing myself in others' shoes. The first time when my initial decision was wrong? Or I'm just refusing that killing him was wrong. I don't want to believe that I could be wrong or short-sighted. Ryuk silently thought to himself, but the notification panel faded afterward. But still, I got a good bargain, you know. I got their core reactor. I'm sure that should put them in quite the pinch. And finally, I got the first tool to upgrade the Techno-Void Ruin. Sooner or later, I would evolve the Techno-Ruin and get my own powerful army. And also, I learned another aspect of Etherius, the power of imagination. Inputting one's will and Etherius to create a domain where one's imagination will instantly bloom to life. And ultimately, I get to understand just how strong I truly am right now, and put all my skills to use against a strong opponent too. That give me some confidence, knowing I can fully take on even abnormal eternity-grade experts. The fight isn't as hopeless as you may think, system. Grade, Starweave main base. Beep. Sending reports in request of the situation at Zone B. Null Gate War in Grade C. The Null Army is currently in battle with the Ascension Alliance, with major powerhouses balancing the scale. 5 Null Wanderers are present, 4 of whom are currently engaged in battle. A total of 5 pseudo-eternal stage experts have been deployed, alongside 2 eternal beings from the Ascension Alliance. The Eternals include one from the Onyx Coil Group and another from the Sky Rend Alliance. Both eternal beings have yet to engage in battle due to one of the pseudo-eternal beings choosing to remain standing. This could hint at the possibility of a Null King's descent. If such were to happen, the 2 eternal beings might need more backup from the other Eternals. The situation is still under control, for now. Beep. Sending reports in request of the situation at Zone A Null Gate War in Grade A Lifeline Corner. The Null Army is currently in battle with the Ascension Alliance, with major powerhouses clashing. There are 10 pseudo-eternal stage beings, and 1 Null King currently engaged in battle against the Alliance warriors. The Alliance forces include 7 pseudo-eternal stage beings and 4 eternal stage beings. 1 from the Lycanus Pack, 1 from the Giant Kings, another from the Elunari dynasty, and 1 from the Vampiro family. The war situation is burning hot, with all eternal stage beings and pseudo-eternals along with the Null King locked in fierce combat. According to Starweave statistics, backups might be needed to ensure victory. An estimated 5 more pseudo-eternal beings or 2 more eternal beings are required. Things are getting worse. Peak Weave Astralaxia. The combined might of the Ascension Alliance is struggling to hold the line against the invading Nulls. And we're almost out of backups. The thick masculine voice projected through the glass walls of the blue-painted room. About 100 holographics were beeping in the air, most of them sharing various footages of an ongoing battle. There was a large office table in the center of the room. A seat stood behind it, and behind that chair was the man who had spoken. He was clad in futuristic white trousers and upper vest which seemed like a combination of a hoodie and a mask, though both were unworn and laying behind his neck. His hands were folded behind his back as he took his place. Sitting before him in the other chair was a lady, wearing the same robes, a long white gown adorned with a glittering, star-like appearance. Her long blue hair trailed down behind her as her eyes remained knitted on the various flashing holographics. Exactly how many backups can we afford if things go south? The lady asked. The man furrowed his brows before replying. Well, we have a lot of Cataclysma stage experts left, but in a war of this scale, they won't be able to create much of a ripple. The only ones who could make a major impact are the Eternity stage experts, and right now, Endearth only has 3 Eternity stage experts who are not currently at war. You're the 4th, Peak Weave Astralaxia. Send a message to all 3 and inform them to prepare for deployment. If the situation in Zone A Null Gate War in Grade A Lifetime Corner gets worse, deploy 2 of the Eternity experts to assist. And if a Null King appears in Zone B, send the last Eternity expert to support the front. Astralaxia said as the man his lips parted to say more only to halt at the last instance. He eventually nodded, replying, Yes, Peak Weave Astralaxia. I'll get to it now. He turned his back and stepped into the elevator. The door closed with a ding, and once more, silence followed in the room. A deep exhale settled in the room after the man left. Astralaxia's hand, which had been resting on the large table, retreated to her side as her neck dropped backwards, landing against the headrest of the chair behind her. Her eyes closed for a few minutes, flashing with memories, mainly consisting of footages. She remained in that state for a long while before her lips eventually moved. Things are getting harder than I imagined. The words pierced through the room. Yes, seems like you're truly in quite the pinch. The voice rang out right after, and Aster unconsciously nodded her head. But in the next instant, her eyes flashed open in shock, her neck snapping upward as she looked before her, only to find the back of an extraordinarily tall figure standing right there. She couldn't see his face, but she could faintly see the tips of horns peeking up. Her hands instinctively rose up to his back, conjuring a powerful ball of etherius that burned and cracked the space around it. And who are you? Aster asked, though her mind was already burning with questions. How did he get in? The glass here is harder than diamonds and has been installed with space-locking power. No one can come in through teleportation or anything else. The only way through is the elevator, but I didn't hear the ringing. Besides, he came in here with most likely no permit robe, which should have set off all the alarms, yet they're all quiet. Just how did he get in? The ball of ether crackled with even more power, but the figure didn't turn back. He leaned closer to the various footages in the air, studying them with close scrutiny as if searching for something. Eventually, he rose upright and then calmly turned towards her. How are you doing, Aster? Been a long time, he greeted with a smile. Aster sat in shock for a couple of seconds. Her mind couldn't wrap around the face before her. It was devastatingly appealing, almost unbelievably so, but those horns sent the hairs on her body standing on end. The face was unrecognizable, but if there was one thing that shook her to her core, it was that voice and that smile. They were far too familiar. Her mind raced, connecting dots with a speed that blurred out everything else. One image rose to the surface, burning away all doubt, and Aster's eyes flashed in disbelief. Ryuk? Seems like I haven't been forgotten due to old age, at least. That leaves some hope, except you looked pretty freaked out. Ryuk's words came out along with a teasing grin. Aster's eyes flashed in disbelief before she mentally recalled her attack, her hand lowering to the table only to aid in helping her rise to her feet. Even then, with her exceptional height, she only reached the height of his chest. How did you? You left this, remember? Ryuk said before she could complete her words, as he unfurled his palm. In it was a communication device, which Aster's eyes widened upon sighting. It floated forward, and she took it in her grasp. This was the final thing she needed to completely drop her guards. It was the device she had left for Ryuk to be able to track her. This explains why he could track me so fast and why he's here at all. Ryuk, Aster called out, her voice mixed with faint disbelief, but most of all, it brimmed with tiredness. Something Ryuk didn't fail to notice. In an instant, he was an inch before her, his arms wrapping around her and pulling her into a hug. It must have been exhausting, Aster, but it should be okay now. He whispered into her ear, tearing down the little resistance she might have left, and unconsciously, her body melted into his embrace. A line of tears dripped from her left eye, sliding down his shoulder as she buried her head deeper. It has truly been tiring. It really was for Aster, to keep this up for so long, to stay strong and all alone too. She had left a long time ago form the ruin and had spent a week waiting or perhaps hoping for Ryuk to appear. But when he didn't, she had left the tracking device and went on her own. And slowly, days turned into weeks, weeks into months, and she never saw Ryuk again. What affected her the most was guilt. He had simply needed a place to lie low, and she had taken him to that ruin. A ruin where he must have eventually met his end, the only thing that described the meaning for his absence. She was the one responsible for killing him, and after that, she had sworn it her mission to make sure his will of saving Endearth was fulfilled. It was hard work for her alone, most especially with the inhabitants of Endearth, who could never understand why she was working for them and held zero trust, eyeing her as an alien with an unclear purpose. There was no one she could feel safe confiding in, no one with whom she felt a sense of familiarity and understanding, except Ryuk himself. And she had killed him. The guilt had powered her all this time, and truly it had been exhausting. For some minutes, the sound of silent sniffing was all that filled the room. The tears soaked Ryuk's shoulder, but he didn't falter at all. After about 10 minutes passed, the sniffing faded, and they both slowly parted from the hug. I know you have a lot of questions, and I also wish I could learn more about what has happened all this time since my absence. But I think we have more pressing issues right now, no? Ryuk said, as Aster inhaled deeply, settling down the chaotic emotions before her eyes opened once more, brimming with seriousness and focus. Yes, we do. The greatest problem is happening here in Guard A. Just a few kilometers away, the war is ongoing in full heat, and the Eternity Stage experts we have are struggling. They need backup urgently. I've asked for 2 more Eternal Stage beings to prepare to support, but even those ones are only available because they're still in healing from their last fight. I'm afraid they're not of much use against the fight. We would barely be able to inch away a victory, but not without massive casualties and the potential to lose an Eternity Stage expert of ours. Aster analyzed, as Ryuk's eyes flashed, calculations ongoing in his head. Before long, he turned to the glass wall and immediately, his eyes flashed with a burning blue light as the entire world briefly zoomed under Ryuk's gaze, soon settling on a particular place where the abyssal energy concentration was above the roof. His eyes flashed. The war is taking place exactly 30,000 kilometers east of this building, right? Ryuk asked, as Aster's eyes flashed in surprise. He can see that far? Yes, the coordinates are correct, Aster said, but then, a beeping sound filled the air as a new footage opened up. A Null King has descended from the open portal in Grade C, and the Eternity Stage experts have now engaged in battle. A full-blown war has erupted within, and they might be needing backup soon. The war is ongoing in 2 places? Ryuk asked, and Aster nodded. Yes. Then it's simple. Do you have access to the Eternity Stage experts currently in war in Guard A? He asked, and Aster nodded again. They all have communication devices that I can connect with. Good. Then send them a message. Tell them to prepare to move to Grade C and help the 2 Eternity experts who are fighting there. I'll arrive at the Grade A battlefield in 5 minutes. In that time frame, prepare them a map or jet of Grade C, where the second full war is happening, and let them join that war as quickly as possible. If they reach 5 Eternal Stage beings on that battlefield in Grade C instead of the current 2, I think that'll be enough to secure victory. It will, Aster said, but then her eyes pinpointed in confusion as she asked, but what about the Null King in Grade A? Who will take care of them if all the Eternity expert leave for Grade C? But then she watched at Ryuk stretched out his hand and softly tapped her on the head. You've been in charge since forever, little Aster. I think it's time you leave things to the man now, he said with a grin, as Aster wiggled her head off his pat. I'm not little, you goof, she said, as Ryuk chuckled mockingly. Then he turned toward the glass and began moving out. "Send the orders now, Aster." Those were his last words before his image suddenly glitched, and all Aster saw was a beam of light that appeared 500 meters away in one blink and disappeared in the other blink she made. How fast? Once he was gone, she grabbed the communication device as her teeth gritted together, but she pressed the call button down in the end. "I'll trust you once more, Ryuk. Once more." Vroom. The sound of the air being pierced silently rang out as a figure soared forward with blinding speed, circular lines appearing around him with every inch of his movement through space. The figure was none other than Ryuk, who silently traveled forward, his blue rotating vortex of an eye locked in the far distance. From so far away, he could already sense the polluted smell in the air, but it wasn't just the smell. Right now, he could see tiny bits of dark dots that littered the surrounding air. He resumed flying forward, and soon enough he could feel it. The thunderous ripples stretched as far as the eyes could see, reverberating through space. After 4 minutes of traveling at a speed of Mach 380, Ryuk finally arrived in the airspace. Truly a battlefield, he muttered to himself as he looked down at the chaos around him. Below the ground was a mix of many races. Elves with their pointy ears and bows, Titans with their exceptional height and massive hammers, vampires in their draping red robes, werewolves, seemingly a combination of man and beast, weaving through the battlefield, and many other races. But if there was one thing easily noticeable, it was that all the different races were in a war against a single race. And that race consisted of beings oozing an incredibly dark aura with every movement. The dark aura wasn't like void energy or shadow energy. No, it was something far more sinister. It was abyssal energy, and the race itself was none other than the Nulls. Surprisingly, this time, they weren't the ordinary Nulls that looked like beasts, birds, or cats. This time, they were even more monstrous. Some were vaguely humanoid, except with physiology that could only have formed from a psychopath's twisted nightmare. Others looked like masses of liquid and gas, weaving through the air like ghosts, their maws clamping down occasionally and devouring their prey. There were also flying Nulls in the sky, but they weren't like birds. They were aerial nightmares, humanoid bats about 2 meters in height, blazing around with wings radiating shadows. Occasionally, they would grab an unlucky soldier from the ground into the air before ripping him apart and dropping his remains onto the crimson battlefield below. Rivers of red had filled the cracks in the ground, and new cracks were being made, along with new blood. The Nulls? Their numbers are many. Ryuk couldn't help but notice. But he soon realized the 10 family warriors weren't doing that badly either. Mostly because they had 2 exceptional fighters that brought down massive amounts of Nulls with every one of their attacks. One of those exemplary soldiers was an elf, an elven man to be exact. His appearance was that of a tall and ethereal figure. Silver blonde hair cascaded past his waist, and glowing green eyes shimmered like moonlight. He wore an elegant robe embroidered with celestial patterns, and in his hands was a weapon, a radiant bow that fired arrows infused with apex energy. At first glance, the man looked incredibly calm, even amid the surrounding death. He seemed patient, too. His lips were moving occasionally with every pull of his arrow, and Ryuk could faintly hear the spell words. Nature's eternal art, Starvale Rain. Immediately, he pulled on his singular arrow, and just like Alina, the Silverunic princess, a barrage of light arrows burst out from that single shot. The arrows rained down in a wide arc with enough power to clear an entire Null army in seconds. His shots were unending, flicking apart sections of the battlefield with their light that seemed capable of erasing abyssal energy entirely. Each arrow dealt powerful strikes against the Nulls, who were almost guaranteed to die with every single firing of his. Although, there were some powerful Null wanderers among the crowd, unleashing their own attacks to prevent the elf from going on an unchecked killing spree. But he wasn't the only one. There was another Eternity Stage expert, one who was engaged in a powerful brawl with 2 Null wanderers at the same time, yet wasn't losing. It was a female vampire. Ryuk knew this, not only from the crimson eyes glowing beneath the black veil she wore, but even more from her deadly pale skin and midnight black hair. Dressed in flowing noble garb that seemed to be woven from shadows, She held a peculiar weapon covered in a blood aura. Double rapiers were in both her hands, and they clashed powerfully with the two Null Wanderers. Each of her attacks was incredibly deadly, ripping apart chunks of dark blood when they met her foes, and he noticed their blood drain into her weapons, sharpening them even more. And it was barely a second later when one of the Nulls was cleaved down from the top of his head straight down below. His body split in two as she turned to the remaining Null. A powerful battle unfolded. Blood razors surrounded the entire air, acting like some sort of telekinetic attack as she engaged in a fierce fight with the remaining Null Wanderer. After much exchange, her lips moved as she called upon an art. Eternal blood art. Sanguine Dominion. All the spilled blood on the battlefield suddenly began converging and soon formed the shape of spectral beasts that instantly aligned by her side. A battle of 12 against 1 began with the remaining Null Wanderer, and not long after, he was pinned down by the beasts. With a swift slash, she decapitated the Null Wanderer, his head rolling onto the ground, only for his dark blood to be sucked into her rapiers, which glowed with even more light. A grin with an evil allure laid on Ravlitha's lips as she stepped forward to continue fighting with the remaining Null Wanderers, who were facing pseudo-eternity stage experts. But then she paused as, suddenly, the sound of something soaring forward rang out, and once again the battlefield seemed to pause for a second as a shadow of a new entity covered an entirety of the battlefield below as the 10 family shoulders immediately fled from the scene. Kaboom! It smashed into the ground, crushing some unlucky Nulls who hadn't run away like the other warriors as dust rose into the air, but then, boom! It was the sound of ear-deafening explosions ringing out ceaselessly and quickly approaching the battlefield. Clang! The sound resembled explosions, but through the chaos, Ryuk could filter out a different sound. One that rang like metals crashing against metal. It wasn't long before a figure pierced through the void, spinning in the air a few times before crashing onto the floor. Unlike the Titan, however, he managed to remain grounded, his gigantic nails dragging sparks as they scraped against the dried blood in the cracks. He came to a stop and rose upright, revealing a figure covered in steel-like fur. It was a humanoid wolf, better called a werewolf, with piercing red eyes. He turned to look at the giant by his side, who slowly sat up with a heavy groan. "We're not to go all out with him, Gravik. We can't defeat him. All we need to do is stall until Ravlith and Naturis finish off the Null Wanderers. Then we can all bond together and work toward defeating it. If we go toe-to-toe like you're doing, we'll only get crushed before its might." The werewolf's husky voice rang out as he turned his piercing red eyes toward Gravik, who slowly rose to his feet, his hands grabbing his enormous hammer. But then, thump! The sound of heavy stomping rang out as a figure slowly walked out from the dark distance, cloaked in shadows that curled and swirled around its body. "What's happening? What's with the backward rush?" the Eternity Elven-ranked expert asked, noticing the Null Wanderers who had been fighting the pseudo-eternal stage experts suddenly retreating backwards toward the direction of the being that was approaching. "They're regrouping?" Ravlith said, arriving by the side of the remaining Eternity stage experts. "But why?" she muttered softly as the battlefield parted into two sides. The Null had rejoined ranks and shifted backwards, while the Ascension Alliance warriors stood behind the 4 Eternity stage experts, whose brows furrowed in focus as they observed the unfolding events. It was as though the battle was just beginning again. But then, the sound of sniffing rang out as Fenrir's nose perked up. He felt an alien scent. He began sniffing harder, something that was noticed by the remaining Eternity experts, right before they watched his body jerk back and his gaze rise. The Eternity stage expert did the same, but their eyes narrowed as they watched a figure descend slowly from the air toward the army, his eyes scanning every single one of them. The first thing they noticed was his horns, but unlike the Nulls, he didn't radiate any abyssal energy. He felt like a new race entirely. The warriors instinctively got into a battle-ready stance. "Damn it! Now there's an unknown alien, and the Nulls behind us," Gravik thought as they waited for the young man, who finally descended and landed lightly on the floor. "And who are you?" "Naturis, the High Elf," asked Ryuk as his feet touched the ground beneath him. Ryuk replied calmly, Who I am is not important. What matters is you all bringing out your telecommunication device, wherever you're keeping it. The 4 Eternity Stage experts frowned, then glanced at Ryuk, who remained motionless in the same spot, without any sign of action. They eventually brought out their devices, only to find them all ringing at the same time. "Peak we've asked her?" Ravlith murmured under her breath. Just from their reactions, Ryuk could sense they knew Aster. They swiped the call, and the words came through clearly. "This is an important message. A new Null King has appeared in Grade C. TCH." The 4 Eternity experts clicked their tongues in unison upon hearing the news. They were already struggling to deal with one here, and another one had already appeared. A total of 2 Eternity Stage experts have been deployed to Grade C and are currently engaged in battle against the Null. The Eternals include one from the Onyx Coil Group, Eternity Ravek, and another from the Sky Rend Alliance, Eternity Jorson. I'm afraid both will not be able to handle the Null King alone. I need you 4 Eternity Stage experts to join them immediately. The jet will reach you in exactly 70 seconds from now. Aster's voice echoed through the communication devices as the experts stood stunned. But we have yet to even finish the Null King here. If we leave, all of the remaining warriors will be destroyed. We cannot leave, Ravlith replied, but Aster's voice continued. Leave, and take the jet to Grade C to help Ravek and Jorson. As for the current Null King, there's an expert on his way who can handle it. They all turned in disbelief to Ryuk, who responded calmly. I'm already here, Aster. Good. That's fast, Ryuk, Aster said. Ryuk simply grinned. Wait. Are you listening to yourself? Peakweave Aster. You want us to leave the fate of the entire Ascension Alliance warriors in the hands of this mysterious expert? Fenra the werewolf barked. How? How would he be able to deal with something all 4 of us struggle to hold back? But then, kaboom! An incredibly powerful explosion resounded as the ground beneath them sank, and something tore forth through the cloak of abyssal energy. A dark skeletal claw with horrific spikes emerged, taking all the distracted Eternity Stage experts by surprise. It slashed toward them all, and just when it seemed they would all be blown apart, the sound of palms clapping echoed as a horrifying shockwave burst through the entire area, blowing back all 4 Eternity Stage experts, who landed 100 meters away. Their eyes widened in shock as they stared at the scene before them. Standing there was the horned young man, his hands raised, tightly clasping the gigantic claw of abyssal energy, nearly twice his size. Yet it hung suspended in the air, unable to move him. The floor beneath him had already been reduced to an abyss from the power, yet he remained floating mid-air, his hands unshaken as he held back an attack that could have leveled an entire city. He stopped the attack of the Null King? Ravlith, the female vampire, gasped in shock as she looked at the unbelievable scene before her. Not only that, but he's not even losing out. Gravek's words followed as they watched the horned young man slowly raise his gaze to the cloak of shadow. Ryuk's eyes flared with blue light as his gaze pierced through the shadows where the cloak was, locking onto the most horrific-looking monster he had ever seen. But instead of fear, he only grinned. What is it, little monster? Afraid of letting the world see how weak you are, so you hide behind a cloak. His taunting voice rang out and then, roar. An incredibly powerful roar burst out from within the cloak, ripping the entire shroud away to reveal an anomaly whose second claw blasted toward Ryuk from the side, intent on killing him off with one stroke. But before it could reach, Ryuk's second fist clenched into a fist and then, boom! The space beneath Ryuk's feet shattered into nothing to reveal an endless void as he took a single step forward and then delivered an uppercut. Kaboom! It was like a mini-star exploded as the impact passed through the Null King, shattering the space behind it into an endless void. He was instantly sent flying up, disappearing for about 10 miles backward, leaving nothing but shattered space fragments in his path, along with the crushed bodies of the vicious Nulls who happened on its path. Who? Just who is he? The voice of Fenra quaked as he beheld the destroyed scene and the missing Null King. For the last 7 hours, he, along with the Titan Gavrak, had not been able to push back the Null King even an inch, even with their ultimate attacks. All they had done was stalling him until the rest were done, and even that was already difficult on its own, and yet, a single punch was enough to send the Null King so far away from the battlefield, he was nowhere to be found. Vroom! Suddenly, from a distance, the sound of a jet humming rang out as they all turned toward the distance and watched a sleek silver jet appear in the air, hovering above them. But then, their gazes turned back to Ryuk, who gave them a side glance. You all leave for Grade C. Work together with the remaining Eternity experts, and see that you defeat the Null King. I believe a fight of 6-1 should be enough to take down that thing. As for this place, leave it to me. I'll take things from here, Ryuk said one more time as the experts looked at him, their eyes still filled with disbelief. But as Aster's words rang out once more, urging them to hurry, they all clenched their teeth as they turned to the hovering jet, jumping upwards and entering into the hatch. Immediately, it closed up, and the jet disappeared into the distance with incredible speed as Ryuk watched it leave, before turning to look at the remaining army who were looking at him, unable to muster a word. The Eternity Stage experts they had relied on, and the only reason they were fighting, had gone. The one remaining was the horned young man, whose eyes were staring at them just as blankly as they were looking at him. Ryuk took a deep breath before he addressed them. 65% of you are injured. 15% of you are weary already. And the rest, the 20% of you, are the only ones who still have some bit of flame to want to fight, Ryuk stated as he looked at the army. And true to his words, most of the soldiers were in a state of battle fatigue. All that had kept them going the whole while was hope, due to the presence of the Eternity Stage experts. It was not a wrong thing, but it was safe to say they were all dead tired. But why wouldn't they be? They've been fighting the Nulls for close to 7 hours now without rest. Even if one had the energy, they would be weary in their hearts and will, seeing so much blood and so much death. Even though one could argue since they were soldiers they ought to be used to it, but the truth was they have never been in a war this bloody in their entire lives. So for that reason, I'll give you all a simple task. Amongst the 20% of you who still have some flames, 9% are healers. So all healers on this battlefield, you have just a single job. Heal up all the injured on the battlefield, or at least help mend together the gravely injured. As for those who are not injured, then you have just one task, Ryuk said as their eyes furrowed. Just watch, he said. Watch? They asked in return as Ryuk nodded. Yes, watch. And gain some experience too if you will, he said. And in the next instant, the entirety of space around Ryuk wavered as he uttered, Activate Techno Void Ruin. In the next instant, the air began glitching as bizarre energy soon filled everywhere, and that was when they began coming out. Glitching figures whose forms couldn't be brought or retained to actual faces. Some were titans, some were unexplainable abominations, and some were humanoid horrors, all glitching with blue energy. But the glitching was only for a few seconds as they began stabilizing their forms, all hovering behind Ryuk. Their number was small, just about 100, but their aura was twice more overpowering as the army that was currently gathered on the battlefield. A few centimeters behind him, a figure came to stand, and it was none other than Ascendant General Obliver along with his floating grimoire. Now that they were in the physical world, Ryuk could feel their energy waves, and it was incredibly raw and powerful, even more so than in the Techno Void Ruin. In fact, it was twice what he knew them to be in the Techno Void Ruin. Seems like placing the core reactor in the Techno Void Ruin helped. I can sense Ascendant General Obliver is back to his peak. When he fought with me the last time, Ryuk muttered to himself, but then, roar!